Yeah, I'm on. Okay. I have all these things that I probably won't even look at. I have a tendency not to. Anyway, and I've just lost it anyway. I'm technologically challenged, by the way. Totally and completely technologically challenged. As a matter of fact, if I don't have a daughter in the house or my husband in the house, I don't watch TV. I don't watch movies because I don't know how to stream. I have no clue how to do that. So I read a book instead. When I was about 14, 15, something like that, my mom gave me a Bible. It was the trending Bible. It was during a time when the Jesus freaks and all of that. And it was called Reach Out. And it was in the Living Bible translation or whatever. Anyway, in the flyleaf, as you open the book up, the words that my mother wrote were from Timothy, verse 4:12. Let no one think less of you because you are young, but be an example. And this last week, 2 weeks ago, we received our shipment from Singapore with boxes and boxes of books. As I said, I read. And I pulled out that Reach Out Bible, and there it was. Let no one think any less of you because you are young. Well, it's not the only thing I found in the shipment. Found a lot of treasures, things that matter to me. When we had to decide what comes and doesn't come, a friend of mine was like, you don't need that. What do you need that for? Because so-and-so gave it. It had a memory. Everything I had a memory. So it was hard to give them up because of the memories. But this one is an especially important memory to me. His pants fall off, sorry about that. Now, I don't save this guy because green is my favorite color. It's not. I don't save him because he's particularly attractive. He was attacked by our first pet. I don't want to forget my first pet, so I've never mended him. I don't keep him because I like tennis. I don't particularly care. I can watch tennis, but Wimbledon's cool. By the way, his name is Bjorn Berg. Some of you might remember Bjorn Borg of long ago. Well, there was a whole line of bears. I also have Queen Elizabeth. No, I don't have her. I have Bertzie Garland. I have Hunt for Red October. As you can imagine, he's a red bear. Anyway, but I don't keep him because I particularly like tennis. I keep him because my husband gave this to me, this silly green bear, on the day that we both knew we were in love. So I keep him. He's traveled the world with me. I carry him on airplanes. He's gone everywhere with me. My funny green bear, and he's a little worse for the wear. But I save him because it's a reminder of how much my husband loves me. That he would buy me a silly green bear that costs too much just because I thought it was cute. And it's a reminder of our love. And we hang on to things. I don't want to put him on the floor, though he's had worse. We hang on to things to remember things. We build statues. We build monuments. I remember when I left America to marry my husband in South Africa. I thought I was leaving America forever and ever. And as I was flying out of New York, I saw the Statue of Liberty beneath me. And I cried, and I cried. And I continued to cry all the way until I got to South Africa. The flight attendant brought me cup after cup after cup of tea because she didn't know what else to do with this crying girl in the back of the airplane. But the Statue of Liberty to the Americans is a symbol of what is best about us, our ideals. We don't always live up to our ideals. None of us do. But it's a representation of what we believe in as a nation, what we strive to be and who we are. And that's what memorials do, what statues do. They remind us of who we are. They unite us. Any American anywhere would see the Statue of Liberty and remember that we came from someplace else. That we believe in certain things, values that hold us together. And so that's what they do. They remind us who we are collectively together. And they're important. In the Bible, we read of a time when God commanded his people to remember, to set up stones. And in Joshua 4, we have the story of where God said, remember this. Now, to understand this story, we first have to go back 40 years. And as a matter of fact, because God doesn't leave things to chance, ever, it was 40 years exactly 40 years since a people enslaved by the Egyptians, the Hebrew children, were liberated, where against all odds they were brought out of Egypt, where God had sent plagues, horrible, awful plagues, not to punish the Egyptians, but so that they would see that in the midst of all their gods, that there was one true God, one God who was powerful, one God who could effect change, and one God who cared passionately for his people. He wanted the Egyptians to see and know who he was. And so the plagues were sent. And then when the people of Israel had traveled out and the Egyptian army was at their back and the Red Sea was in front of them, and it seemed as if they were literally between a rock and a hard place, and there was nothing they could do, Moses, through God, used his rod to part the Red Sea. And they crossed over. And it's been 40 years exactly since that day. And now it's time. They had wandered in the wilderness. They had sinned against God by building a golden calf to worship because they still couldn't get their minds wrapped around the fact that this God was going to take care of them. They still had this feeling they had to take care of themselves. And so for 40 years they wandered and they wandered. And they had passed away. And now 2 men are left, Joshua and Caleb, the 2 spies who believed God's promises, who believed that the God who parted the Red Seas still cared about them, still wanted the best for them. And so these 2 men are all that are left who saw the miraculous working of God. The only 2 who experienced God's amazing power. They're all that left. And now they have 2 million people, 2 million Hebrews who have only known wilderness, who have only known wandering, who have never had a home, that have been restless, homeless, believing in a God when they hadn't seen his miraculous powers. But now God says it's time. It's time. I made a promise, and I am a promise keeper. And so now it's time. Joshua, it's for you now. Moses is gone. The person you leaned on, the person you depended on, the person who held you up, that person is gone. So Joshua, it's you and it's me. And Joshua, I'm enough. I'll see you through. And so I think in a beautiful way, God honors Joshua and encourages him and lets him know that he is an unchanging God, that he is a God who is never going to leave his people, that he is a God who still is powerful, and that he will use Joshua with his unique giftings and skills that are different from Moses. But God is still the same. God hasn't changed. So they come to the Jordan River. Now, most of the time, the Jordan River, which they have to pass to get into the promised land that God is going to give them, most of the time, the Jordan River, you can walk across, knee deep. It's easy to get across. But God picked this day when the river was swollen, this day when the river was at flood, this time, this season when the river was unpassable on foot. And so once again, they are stuck between a river that can't be crossed and enslavement into the wilderness wandering that they have known for 40 years. So they have a choice: trust God or go back to what they've always known. What's safe, what's comfortable. Maybe it wasn't easy, but it's all they knew. So what are they going to do? And once again, God shows up. This time, where it had been Moses' staff, this time it's the Ark of the Covenant. This time it's the Ark that holds the sacred Ten Commandments, the sacredness, where God has chosen that the people of Israel would know, I am present among you. Not a golden calf to worship, but a visual reminder of, I am a sacred and holy God, and I live and work among you. And so the priests carry this ark. They have readied themselves. They have consecrated themselves. They have given themselves totally over to God and his purposes and plans. And so they are at the foot of the river. And they have to take that step of faith. This time it's not a rod. And if it didn't work, stir the water a little and step back. It's okay. This time they have to step in. They have to actually physically start moving into the water before the water will part. So the priests are commanded, step in. And as soon as the sole of their foot touches the water, as soon as that happens, the waters part. So picture it. We have 2 million people, according to the census. Maybe it was in hundreds of thousands. I like 2 million. It's a nice big round number. The population of Busingen, by the way, is like less than 1,500. So picture all of Busingen going across. Drop in the bucket compared to the 2 million. So let's add Winterthur. Let's add Schaffhausen. Let's add Geneva. How about Bern? Can't think of any other. Zurich. No, not a Zurich yet. I'll get there. But add all those other cities to it. We haven't even got 500,000 yet. Now let's add Zurich. Now if we add Zurich, we're at 1 million. So if we take all the major cities of Switzerland, we still don't have as many people as crossed the river that day. Just picture it in your mind. All of those people, 1/4 of the population of Switzerland crossing this river. It must have been a sight to see. And the whole time they're crossing, the priests stand in the middle holding the ark. Just imagine the faith of those priests as one by one, actually probably more than one by one, they're probably spread out. But these people cross and they're wondering, God, you still got your hands out? You still holding the river back? The faith of those priests. And then God commands them to do something else. Go back, one man from each tribe, go back and get a stone. Not a pebble, not a little rock, get a stone. One big enough that you have to put on your shoulders. Go back and get it. And then I want you to set it up in the town of Gilgal. And I want you to always remember. And this is what in Joshua we read in Joshua chapter 4, verse 20 through 24. As for those 12 stones which they had taken from the Jordan, Joshua set them up at Gilgal. And he said to the sons of Israel, when your children ask their fathers in time to come, saying, what are these stones? Then you shall inform your children, saying, Israel crossed this Jordan on dry ground. For the Lord your God dried up the waters of the Jordan before you until you had crossed, just as the Lord your God has done to the Red Sea, which he dried up before us until we had crossed, so that all the peoples of the earth may know that the hand of the Lord is mighty, so that you may fear the Lord your God forever. So in this final verse, we find 3 reasons why God has asked us to remember. I think it's really cool of God to give us 3 reasons, like a 3-point sermon. It makes things so easy, but we have 3 reasons. The first one is to pass on the stories of God's faithfulness to our children and to succeeding generations. We looked at the precious children, little girls that took the offering. Oh, they're beautiful. They are so cute. But it's more, to pass on is more than just, oh, you're cute, you're wonderful, you're whatever. It's to impart to our children the stories of how God has worked in our hearts and our lives. In Deuteronomy, God says, you shall also teach them. What are you to teach them? This commandment. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, with all your strength. And you are to teach them, speaking of it when you sit in your house, when you walk along the road, when you lie down, and when you get up. In a poetic way, saying, you are to teach them of the devotion you have for your children all the time. In everything you do, in everything you say, everywhere you go, teach your children your devotion. And my husband and I have to admit, didn't always do the best job of that. Too often, being in ministry, our devotion to God was work, and then there was family. Now, it wasn't always that way. We tried to have devotions, and we tried to share our life, but too often our personal life with God was kept personal inside of us. That's not what God says. God says, tell them of your devotion day and night. As you teach in Sunday school, share your devotion, how much you love God. As you sit with your children, talking to them, say how much you love God. We are both of us convinced that God worked a miracle in his life. A miracle. It's so easy in this world we live in for it to be, oh, it's because you're at Zurich, obviously. The doctors are great in Zurich. You know, best care in the world. Or you were young enough, you know, or because you were so strong. But we know beyond a shadow of a doubt that it was God's hand that kept him here, because God still has plans and purposes for his life. And we know that God kept him there. But it isn't always easy to convey that to skeptical people. And our children, our daughters, I'll be honest, they believe in God with all their heart. But not necessarily in a personal God. In their various ways they do. We want them to know that God cares personally for them, that God sees them. Going back to the things that we remember, I have a daughter, my second daughter. When she was very, very young, probably about 7 or 8 years old, we were pastoring in a small church in a town only slightly bigger than Busingen. Had 4,000 people. It was an agricultural place too. And there wasn't much money. There was never enough money. I mean, it was a treat to buy a 39-cent hamburger at McDonald's. And so winter came, and we had been given a coat. It was a blue, for our little daughter, it was a blue coat, and it was a boy's coat. And my little 7 or 8-year-old was all little girl. She was as feminine as could be. And the only coat for her to wear was this blue boy's coat. It killed her. It absolutely killed her to wear it. She was already so shy, and she felt ugly, and she hated it. But it's all we had, so she wore it. I was with my mom and the girls, and we were shopping in a store called Sears in America, and she saw a coat that was a dream. It was beautiful. It was feminine. And she wanted it so bad. She didn't say anything. She just kept looking at it. And she would look at me, and I would shake my head and say, I'm sorry, baby, there's just no money for that. We can't. So we left the store. She looked one more time at the coat, and she left and never said another word about it. Not ever. Well, we had this thing in our district that we were part of, where larger churches would sponsor smaller churches for Christmas. We were obviously the smaller church. And so we were invited to the big city church, and they were going to have a Christmas party for our family. We were the guests of honor. So we had the big dinner, and then they had some presents for us and the children. Katie opened her present first. She's my oldest. And inside was this beautiful blue coat. Feminine, with a little braid on it and everything, very beautiful. And I looked over at Kirsty, my second child, and I could see that inside of her was warring hope and the fear of disappointment. But she was given her package. She took the tissue paper. My daughter was always careful. She's not anymore, actually. She rips her presents. She pulled it aside. She took out the other one. She pulled it aside. And she reached inside very carefully. It was white. I didn't have white tissue. It was in a box. I didn't have a box. She pulled it aside. And there it was. The burgundy the burgundy coat from Sears. As feminine as you can get. Beautiful braid. A little peplum that would fit tightly at her waist. Feminine and beautiful, exactly the coat that she had seen at Sears. The very one. Nobody but me and God knew Kirsty wanted this coat. Nobody. She never told anyone. I never told anyone. And what are the chances in a country as big as America, with Penny's and Kmart and Walmart and TJ Maxx and you name it, all the stores, that they would go to Sears and buy the coat? And they didn't get the coats mixed up. My oldest daughter didn't get this coat, and Kirsty got the blue coat. Kirsty got the coat in exactly the color she wanted, exactly her size. God is El Ra. He sees us. He sees our hearts. Don't ever forget that this amazing God who keeps our world spinning, this amazing God who's like the greatest scientist ever, obviously, that this great God knows your heart and he sees you. He saw a little girl who just needed to know somebody cared. So, of course, I kept the coat. I kept a green bear. I'll keep a coat too. It's to remind us that no matter what. And Kirsten came to a point in her life she needed as an adult to know that God saw her needs, her wants, her desires, and that God cared for her personally. And that's one of the reasons for setting up remembrance stones. is to never, ever forget that God sees you. And that we don't forget to pass that legacy on to our children. God sees them. He knows them. He cares about them personally. He's not waiting for them to grow up to make something of them. He sees and knows them and cares about them. Well, another reason that we must remember is that so that the nations will see of the greatness of God. It's easy for us to sit in here and sing beautiful songs about God. It's easy for us to sit here, stand here, whatever, and sing about the holiness of God, the magnificence of God, and to worship Him. But sometimes when we get out there, it's a little harder. We're never sure what to say or what not to say. We were at a restaurant a few months back, and I can't stand eggs at all, and nothing else on the menu looked good, so I ordered a particular vegetarian thing without eggs, so it pretty much was a vegan meal. Well, the waitress immediately assumed that I was in the stream of New Age. I don't know why, just because I had a vegan meal. But she began to tell us all about her crystals and about this and about that. The restaurant was busy, the restaurant was crowded, and I didn't tell her that I was a Christian. I didn't tell her what my hope was. I don't know why I didn't. I'm being honest with you. I don't know why I didn't. Sometimes our remembrance stones are painful. Sometimes what we have to remember is what we don't want. I don't want to remember that I was a failure. That in a chance when I had to say what my hope was, that it can't be found in crystals, that it can't be found in the trees and the flowers. Those only represent God's amazing power. They're not God's, they're not power. I didn't say something. One of the reasons God wants us to remember is so that the nations can know, so that outside these four walls, people can know. We have a hope. We have a hope that is based in the eternal faithfulness of our God. We have a hope based on His love for us. We have a God who sees and cares. And there's a world out there that's hurting. A world out there that wants to know somebody sees them. That somebody knows they're there, that somebody cares. There's a world out there that needs it despite what material possessions they might have, despite what fame they have, how many followers they have on Instagram. Despite all that, they still want to know, is there something I can hold on to that's bigger than me? Is there something that is more than what I know I am? Is there something dependable? Is there something that's going to be unchanging in a world where in 1 year's time my smartphone is already obsolete? I need to know something that doesn't change. And God's love for His people, His creation, doesn't ever change. The plan of redemption doesn't ever change. The fact that the guilt we carry around can be forgiven and thrown into the sea of forgetfulness, that doesn't ever change. And that's what we need to say to people out there. And finally, the last reason for remembrance is to recognize the omnipotence of God and His compassionate care for us. God works miracles. He is still in the miracle-making business. Now, He might use physicians for miracles, and He does. But the healing, that's a miracle from God. God still works miracles. And we need to remember the times in our lives when God worked a miracle because he cares about us, and we need to keep it in our hearts and our minds. One final story. I like to tell stories. I'm a kindergarten teacher. When we were 25 years ago, when we first were becoming missionaries, we needed to be debt-free to be able to live abroad. We couldn't be making payments, major payments still in the States. So one of the things we had to do was sell our house. Well, we put it on the market. We were taking a step of faith. God was going to come through, and we just knew our house was going to sell and everything would be fine. Week after week after week went by. Nobody even came to see our house. Nobody. Well, Christmas rolled around, and it was getting close to the time we were leaving. We were slated to leave on January 2nd, 2000. I don't know if any of you are old enough to remember Y2K. It's the day after Y2K, when all the airplanes were supposed to fall out of the sky. Yeah, we waited one day to make sure those airplanes weren't going to fall out of the sky. That was a funny time. But anyway, so Christmas, I thought, okay, I'd decorate my house for Christmas Victorian. It's beautiful. And I just knew somebody was going to look at the house and they're going to fall in love with it, with all my beautiful Christmas decorations there. Nobody came. And so it was time just to pack up. I was teaching. Mark had more free time than me, so he did yard sales, got rid of all of our possessions, and with no possessions in the house, all you saw was lime green carpet and burnt orange carpet and avocado green kitchen. It was ugly. And it was bare. And we were speaking, before we left, we were speaking at a church in Yuba City, and we mentioned about our house, and that was a prayer request. And a lady came up to us afterwards, a dear friend, and she said, I want you to know, God is going to sell your house. He won't sell it one day earlier or one day later, but exactly when it needs to sell, so that you will always know God sold your house, not you. God sold your house, and that he has plans and purposes for you, and it's not to come home. You don't have a house anymore. So we said, okay, yeah, whatever. Just before we left to go visit my parents, before we left America for good, we're still going on faith. That house is going to sell, but it hasn't yet, and nobody has looked. An older couple came. They took one look at the house. They immediately made an offer, exactly what we were asking. They didn't try to bargain. And we signed the final paper for the house on the way to the airport to leave the USA. I don't think you can cut it closer than that. God sold our house. And that's a remembrance stone in our minds and in our memories, a remembrance that God still acts, and that he acts in miraculous and symbolic ways, giving us something to cling to. One of Mark's favorite sayings is, never, ever doubt in the dark what God has shown you in the light. In the 25 years we've been on the mission field, there's been lots of doubt. There's been lots of darkness. There have been times that all we wanted to do was go home. But God sold our house. That's our remembrance stone. And so we've held on for 25 years because God has plans and purposes. And we have a choice when it comes to remembrance. We can choose to look at the bad. Not a one of us here doesn't have hurt, doesn't have loss, doesn't have bitterness. Not a one of us here hasn't been hurt by someone. Not a one of us here hasn't had to deal with forgiveness. Can they really forgive that person for what they did to you, to your children? We all have to deal with that. And we have a choice. We can hang on to those. We can hang on to the bitterness. We can hang on to how people hurt us. I can blame somebody for the problems of our family if I want to. Lamentations is one of my favorite verses. And we know it well because there's a hymn that goes with it. But it begins this way. I remember my affliction and my wandering, the bitterness and the gall. I well remember them, and my soul is downcast within me. There's one translation that says, my soul is twisted up and bent over inside me. Yet, this I call to mind, this I deliberately bring to the forefront of my memory. And therefore I have hope. Because of the Lord's great love, we are not consumed. For his compassions never fail. They are new every morning. Great is thy faithfulness. We have a choice. We can remember the bitterness and the gall. We can choose to give those stones to God and say, no, I choose this stone. I choose to remember your goodness, God. I choose to remember how you intervened on my behalf. I choose to remember the cross where you showed and demonstrated your love for me. I choose to remember that nothing can ever separate me from the love of God. I choose those remembrances. I choose to hang on to the times that I know you were real and present in my life. And I'm going to bring those to the front of my mind. Those 12 Hebrews, one from each tribe, had to go back into the river and pick up a stone. And it had to be one large enough that they had to carry it on their shoulders. And then they had to carry it all the way to the place they were going to camp that night, away from the river, and set up the more stones there. That took active work. It wasn't easy. Calling to mind the things of goodness for God sometimes isn't easy. Sometimes we'd like to let me just get through one day at a time. I don't want to think about it. I don't want to dwell on it. I do not want to remember when I was afraid and scared. I don't want to remember when I felt weak and helpless. I don't want to remember any of those things. But we need to remember how when we were weak, God was strong. When we were at the end of our rope, God came through for us. Whether it was through a loving touch of a friend, selling a house, wanting you to feel pretty and loved and cherished, knowing that you were loved. Those things are important for us to hold on to so we do not forget that our God is an awesome God. And he reigns, and he loves, and he has compassion. Hold on to those. Struggle, if it means that, to remember those things. Our God is mighty, and he deserves to be praised among the nations. And that is what he asks us to do. Thank you.